If you are designing your landscape or you are thinking about doing a landscape project this year, then this is the video for you. My name is Hudson and I'm a professional landscape designer, and today I'm going to show you how I approach designing a landscape, which is crucial for three reasons. One, it tells you what your design already looks like or what your house or your bed space already looks like. And two, it'll help you to design and imagine what it would look like in the future. And three, that design will help you to figure out how expensive what you want to do is, or the changes that you want to make are going to be. So we're going to walk through some of that today. In this video, I'm going to be using a whole bunch of drafting and design tools. Don't worry about that. All you're going to need is a piece of grid paper, a pen, and a tape measure. The first thing you're going to do is measure out the outside border of your house and any hardscapes like your driveway or your sidewalks or patios or things like that. And you're going to mark those down on your grid paper. Every square on your grid paper equals 1 foot in real life, or if the grid paper isn't big enough to hold the whole project, then every square equals 2 feet. So that moves it from 1/8 scale down to 1/16 scale. If you were using, you know, a piece of grid paper that actually goes for one inch to 8 squares. Anyway, but the first thing you're going to do is mark out the house and see where the house is and any hardscapes. And then from there, what you're going to do is you're going to measure out from the border or the corners of the house, and you're going to measure straight out until you hit the bed edge. And if this is 16 feet, you're going to measure 16 feet out on your grid paper and mark like just a dot there. And then you're going to continue that along. And what this will allow you to do is create a dot to dot based off of your house for where the bed edge is. And then you can connect those dots just like you were 3 years old. And voila, hey presto, you've got your bed edge. And now you know exactly what your bed edge on your house currently looks like. This same process for measuring works on your trees, any utilities, or really just anything in your lawn and landscape. But first you need to have your house outlined and ready to go. Okay, the next thing we're gonna do, now that we know where our bed edges and our trees and etc. are, our hardscapes and whatnot, is we need to find out what plants we have here that we want to keep and which ones we want to get rid of. On this plan that we're working with, I've got a couple of areas that are circled and are labeled with phlox, myrtle, and pachy, which means pachysandra. And these are areas that I want to keep or note where those existing things are, because this specific client, like you, is a DIY client and they want to do most of the work themselves. And these are things that they specifically want to keep and not remove. What they want me to do is come in and mulch their landscape beds so that they don't have to do that this year. Which, to be real, even if you're a DIY landscaper, if there's parts of your project you just really don't like, hire someone to do it. Like, there's no reason you should have to stress and worry about mulching. If you hate mulching, get a landscaper to do it. By the time you add up your time and the materials of the project and the stress that you use and put into it, you might as well hire someone. Now, unless you live in my area and know who I am, I'm not for hire, but you can save yourself time, stress, and money by picking up my free guide at heocreative.com or by hitting the link below this video or the QR code in the corner with your phone. So pick up that guide and save yourself all three of those things so that you can have more of those to spend on, you know, things that actually matter. All right, let's get to it. Today, I'm going to pull through this entire project, front and back, onto a new piece of paper, a fresh sheet of vellum, and I'm going to go from there and use that to calculate how much material I need and what kind of cost this is going to run up, which is really important if you're going to be doing your landscape this year. Just make sure that you've got the funds to cover the project that you are doing. You don't get halfway done. All right, let's begin. Before I get started, what I want to do is outline my beds in green and just to see where my current beds are. And it'll just make it easier to see as I pull it through. So I've got some beds here. Comes up like that. You can also, if you are struggling with this or you aren't exactly sure if your map of your bed space is good enough, then a trick that we often use professionally is to use Google Earth and just see where those beds line up according to a picture from space. Caveat with that, you always got to double check, but generally Google Earth is going to be pretty accurate, and their measure tool is out of this world. Literally, it's on a satellite. So yeah, it's pretty accurate, and if you are just looking for a quick overhead design that you want to trace of your own property, Google Earth works real well. And then I'm gonna dash in this because the client wants that done, and then a couple evergreens back there. Put my little evergreen symbol on them. This is my favorite kind of client because they're like you guys, they're DIY. And so what they want to do is like just enough, they want to get enough landscaping in, professional help, to help cover the things they can't do. And then the things that they can do, they want to do themselves, you know, save a buck. And so I really appreciate that, appreciate the business, but also appreciate just that mindset of being willing to spend a little bit on your landscape, but like still say, you know what, we're gonna cover most of this, or like we're gonna do most of this ourselves. Yeah, okay, so there we go. So I've got a color graded map, essentially, of how this landscape looks. And you can see those colors kind of pop through here. So that's nice. I get to see that as I'm pulling it through. So let's begin. I'm gonna use a Sharpie, just because it's thicker, on my house, because I want to know what is a stable line, what is part of the actual building itself for all house related angles. I'm gonna use the Sharpie. And then for non-house related angles, I'll use an OA or something like that, something a little thinner. You don't have to do this, you can just write it up however you like, but if you want a cool map of your house to use afterwards, this is a nice way to do it. If you have a surveyor's plat of your property, that's also a really good way to mark out your house, because like surveyor's plats have the official directions for how or like they're based off of the blueprints. And so if you're wondering how your house is oriented on your property and you're thinking of a big property-wide landscape project, or you want to plant trees to screen the edge of your landscape, it's a nice way to figure out really quickly how that all works. And now this is looking much more like a design rather than just a sketch. Okay, and there is the house. It is completely done. Now, while I've got my Sharpie out, I'm just gonna take it and I'm gonna do all of my trees. Any tree that is just a solid tree that's, you know, even if it's big or something like that, I'm gonna color in just the stump of that tree, or where that tree fills, just because I want to know where they are for future reference. All right, now I'm gonna move to a smaller pen, an 08. And what I'm gonna do with this is I'm going to go over the areas that are connected to the house that are not actually part of the house. So like decks or sidewalks, driveways, thicker stuff like that that's like part of the landscape. It's a hard feature, but it's not actually part of the domicile. Not part of the domicile, I say. Now that the hard edges are outlined, I'm going to go ahead and do the bed edges as well. And note where the bed edges start and stop, like where they go from bed edge meeting lawn into bed edge meeting the forest. The next thing I'm going to mark out are any places in the bed where there are already existing plants like Pachysandra or ground covers that I don't want to remove. And I'm also going to mark out any ones that I do want to remove. But on this project, there's nothing there. Also, ooh, don't forget your utilities. Definitely important, and you should definitely call your utility company and have them mark those out so you don't hit a gas line or your irrigation or, you know, your cable or internet, because if you do that, you can't hang out with me. And now I'm just gonna go ahead and anywhere where there's like this yellow, and anywhere this yellow is, where I know that there are existing plants, I'm gonna mark that out, because I want to make sure that I know where the bed space is that I need to mulch and where the bed space is that I don't need to mulch. Okay, so I've got 3 trees back here. I'm gonna change pen sizes. And by 3, you know what, we're gonna go with 5. And those normally get to be 3 feet across at the most. Because I'm doing arborvitaes, which arborvitaes are a great screen. Basically what happens here is this house looks out backwards into this wooded space. There's another house over here. It's in the middle of a subdivision, but there is a little copse of woods, and just in the winter it sticks. It's nothing else. So what we want are some evergreens back here to kind of screen and block the view. Generally with landscape, what you're aiming for is a 10 to 15 year horizon. So if you put in plants today, in 10 to 15 years they are going to be too big for that space. That is the plan, is that in 10 to 15 years you take them out and you put something else new in. And people think that they've done their landscape and they're like, I remember when we did this, 20 years ago. So what happens is the landscapes get super overgrown, and then people are like, man, where's my house? Like, why does it look like a haunted mansion? Or why does the house look so small? Because what happens when you take out a massive bush, say you have a massive tree right here on the corner of the house, like a spruce or something like that, that's just eaten up this corner, is the tree is dwarfing the house. And what a landscape is for, a landscape is supposed to frame the house. You live in the house, landscape frames it and guards your living space in the case of screening trees or things like that. In the case of woods, it provides and creates spaces for you to live and do your life. But when those spaces become too big and they overgrow their area, they start to consume that space and make it smaller, and that's no good. So when you are considering what kind of plants to put in your landscape, count for a 10 to 15 year horizon. Make sure that you are choosing plants that are actually going to, 1, thrive in your area, and 2, aren't going to grow so fast and so big that they are crowding out the space that you intend to use for other things than photosynthesis. It is time to estimate how much material we're going to need for this project. And in order to do that, I'm going to use my estimation form. It basically has listed all the plants that we use and all the other types of material that we use, like mulch, compost, etc. But for this, you just need a blank piece of paper. I'm adding in 5 arborvitaes. I'm just going to write those down here. And then I'm going to painstakingly measure out the bed space. And this is going to be a little tricky because you might notice most of the bed spaces are weird angles. Instead of being able to say 1/8 inch equals 1 foot in real life, and this bed is 2.5 inches, so that equals 20 feet by 1 inch and 7/8, which equals 15. Because all of the bed spaces are abnormal, I can't figure out the square footage just by saying like, oh, it's this side by this side. Instead, what I have to do is estimate. And so this bed here, even though it's an oval, what I'm gonna do is square it off. In my mind, I'm gonna try to go a little past the edges here, the corners, but I'm gonna try to cut off part of the bed as well. And just measure edge to edge, corner to corner. So this is 2.5 inches, which equals 20 feet in real life. And this way it is 1 7/8 inches, which equals 15 feet. So I'm gonna write that here, 20 by 15. Sometimes I'll go ahead and do this equation, but sometimes I'll just write down the amounts of like what times what, and then I'll just go ahead and do all the multiplication at one time, and then what I'm going to end up here with is a column of square footage numbers that I'm going to add together, and that equals a total square footage of the bed space. That bed space square footage then gets divided by 110 for compost or 180 for mulch. Let's get measuring. Now that I've calculated the dimensions of the bed spaces, what I'm going to do is multiply those and then add those all up to equal my total square footage of bed space. So what I've got here, after finishing up this whole design, is I know that I need 20 yards of mulch and I need 5 arborvitaes. And so now what I can do is go to the suppliers of those specific things and ask like, hey, how much does it cost for 5 arborvitaes and 20 yards of mulch? And then I have an estimation for how much this project is going to cost me and how much I'm going to have to spend to get my yard looking really nice. So if you've got any questions about how to do this process, or you have a yard project that you're working on currently, go ahead and pick up my free step-by-step guide down in the link below this video or in the QR code in the corner. It'll walk you through how to do all the steps in this process, as well as installation, so that you can save yourself time, stress, and money while doing your landscape. Thanks for joining me today, and I will see you in the next video.